of what they have done with the Linckr application. So here on stage with me, I have Leon. He's one of the founders of Linckr. And next to him, we have the CTO of Lemon. We have Michael. In the relatively short period that I've at least been in contact with the people from Lemon, or back then Urban Prime, I was very impressed about how they were picking up everything and doing all the stuff that we were providing them in the information. So I'm pretty confident that, well, what you're going to share is going to be pretty awesome. So with that, I'm going to drop off the stage and give it to these guys.
Thank you, Steven. Happy to be here and to tell you something about Linckr and how Axon framework helped us. Not only in getting the ISO certification, I will get to that later on, but also in getting set up our platform. My name is Leon van Dooren. I'm founder and managing partner of Linckr. Michael Schoenmaekers will do, together with me, this presentation.
Yes, I'm Michael. Thank you, Leon. From Lemon, I'm the CTO there. And with Linckr, I was from the start the solution architect when he came with his brilliant, wild ideas about his platform. And with the team of Lemon, we helped them realize their product. So,
and what I'm about to tell you, first of all, I'm not technical oriented. I'm more business-like, but in all my experience, I've done a lot of cooperation in setting up platforms. So I know a bit of it, but Michael knows all of it. So that's how our roles are divided. Linckr. Linckr is all about ease, making life easier, and in the broadest sense of the word. And I'm going to explain what Linckr is about and what goals do we have in setting Linckr into the market for consumers, service providers, etc. 3 years ago, we started a company. Steven already mentioned the company is called Urban Prime, but along the route, it has become Linckr, and I will explain why it has become Linckr in this name. But we looked at the world and we saw, okay, we have consumers on the one hand side, and you have all kinds of service providers on the other hand side. And that can be all kinds of service providers. My partner and I, who started the company, we are from the mortgage, finance markets, and notary legal markets. And we looked at that world and we saw, okay, there's two different worlds. The consumer on one hand side and the service providers on the other hand side, and that should be made easier. And I think everybody will recognize something like this. In your life, in whatever customer journey you're in, you most of the time are connected to multiple service providers, like a notary, like a realtor, like an advisor. But each and every one of them has its own way of communicating with you and have its own processes, its own systems. And they enforce that upon the consumer. And what they provide you is, in the worst case, you have to do everything manually, non-digital. Best case, maybe, at least what they claim, is they already have an app or a My Portal. Well, from our point of view, that's not a My Portal. It's a Their portal, and it contains data from them about you. But it's not your data. And you can't do much with it, but view it. You can't use it, change it, reuse it when you are in a customer journey, which is not just with one service provider, but with multiple service providers. So what you actually have is all kinds of vertical silos. But a typical customer journey, and we take as an example the journey of buying a house. Let's see, I'm too far away, I guess. Does it work? Oh, that was too fast. Yeah. When you buy a house, you have to pass by, as a consumer, in your customer journey, which is more like a horizontal customer journey, you have to go to a realtor, you have to go to an advisor, to a bank, to a notary. And what they all ask is, who are you? Give me proof of your identity. Give me this data, give me that data, give me X data. And a lot of the times it's the same data which you have to present to them over and over again, but in a different way. And also the data you get from one service provider which is being asked by a second service provider is difficult to reuse. So this is very annoying from a point of view of the customer. Having to constantly share the same data in different ways. What we had also the second side, the other side of the coin, the service providers. What are they faced with? I hope it works. No, okay. They are faced with all kinds of challenges. And for most of those challenges, they have, if they already have an automated solution, it's a separate automated solution. But they have to comply to anti-money laundering laws. They have to provide a way of communicating, preferably secure. And I think I'm not saying anything new if I say email is not the most secure way, means of communication. So they face all kinds of challenges, and they have all kinds of solutions for it, but they are all separated. No integrated solutions, point solutions. If you look at those two sides, consumers who are annoyed by doing everything over and over and over again, service providers faced with all these challenges of separated systems and having difficulty to get the right data in the right way from their consumers, we said, okay, this can be done different. And that's why we came upon one platform. The clicker is really not working. It's really working very slow. Okay, we said, okay, we can make it efficient for the service provider, providing them one integrated solution. So what we actually did, we sought a lot of off-the-shelf components and made sure they can communicate. They work together as one platform. And on the... I'm going to do it different. Is it going to work? Yeah. And in the same platform, we also created a consumer app. Why a mobile app? Mobile first. That's what the consumers want. You want to be in the pocket of your customer, and consumers first reach out for their mobile phone and want to do everything. We combined that into one platform, but it's quite a challenge, and we get to that later on. Ultimately, we now have set up the full communication circle, and actually what we call that is infomediation. So we mediate to get information from the consumer to the service provider and back from the service provider to the consumer, but in such a way that the consumer can reuse it. And that's what Linckr is really about. Then we get one world, not two separate worlds. We get one world, the customer, the consumer, is in the middle. And they can connect, and that's where our name comes from. They can link to all those service providers. And they can make all kinds of connections. If you look at the living journey we just thought of, now it's all connected, but via the consumer. So we are not transferring data over the consumer. So he's here, and he has no clue what is all being transferred. No, via the consumer. Because there is legislation that says, GDPR, you have to ask consent of your consumer for specific data. This way, since the data is always transferred via the consumer, you always get consent. Very important. But, not but, first this one. That means that now, all of a sudden, this journey is an integrated journey. It all goes to the consumer. The consumer has its own personal data vault. They can store the data in it, and they can reuse that data with every single service provider. So if you have your identity verified once and authenticated once, you put it in your vault, second service provider asks it, and you say with just one click, it's yours. And I give consent. Same goes for your salary slip. So all that data can be very easily stored and shared. And this way we can configure, and that's thanks to the people of Lemon, any customer journey. We can just do one-on-one relation. We can do for an insurance, for instance. This one we just recently had for ourselves when setting up a new company. We founded a company in Belgium, and it went terribly wrong. And we said, okay, this is why we have to go to Belgium. Because our accountant asks data from us, and he asked, would you do it via email, share your passport copy, share your statements from your holding in the Netherlands? And I said, no, I'm not going to share anything via email. So all workarounds, and he got the email, he got the data. 2 days later, he was very polite, he was very helpful. I saw an email passing by from him, I was in the CC, to the notary, dear colleague, here you have all the data necessary to draw up the deed. And we were like, okay, there's our data on the web. We don't want that, that's why we want Linckr. I'm not going to go through all this, but we want to make it easy for the consumer with all the solutions, all the easy way of using your data and reusing your data, but it should also be safe. On the other hand side, you want to be compliant, very important. Legislation is tough. Compliance is, for service providers, their license to operate. If you're not compliant, shut the door. And it gets firmer and firmer. Even though we are quite young, we have already been nominated for the Dutch Privacy Awards, and we are currently in the competition for the Computable 2023 Customer Experience Award. And from the expert jury, we are rated number 2, and even above SAP, Salesforce, so I'm quite proud of that. Being as a small startup company, being ahead of those big giants, we're doing something right. And one of the things that was in the title, from the beginning on, even as a startup, we decided, based on the fact that we are on such personal data of the consumer, it has to be safe. It has to be secure. We have to treat the data in the right manner, taking into consideration the promise that we give to the service provider, it is compliant. So we went for the 27001 and 701, security and privacy, both. And in that, the auditor we had was quite explicit, and I spoke to the people of AxonIQ about that. She said, I have never encountered a process and a tech stack which made my life so easy for ticking all the boxes. Because they had to do the audit and had to see, okay, are they compliant? Do they have all the policies in place? But do they also exercise these policies in their platform? Michael will show you later on how he was so able to astonish her, but she was really flabbergasted. That is where we are, but now the funny thing is, this is where we are now. I think 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we started with Lemon. And we had a kickoff session, and he said, we have 3 guiding principles for Linckr. Easy. Easy, easy. That's what you have to make. Easy for the consumers, because it's an app, it should be idiot-proof, everybody should be able to use it. Easy for the service providers, because it might seem as an additional tool, but you don't want to have it seen as a burden. And easy for the people who build and maintain the platform, because we will never be ready. It's constantly in movement. We constantly will have new features, new customer journeys, because Linckr doesn't have any boundaries. We can do this in every market. We can do this for every customer journey. And then there were 2 other topics, 2 guiding principles. The first one, security by design. We prepared the kickoff meeting and said this is absolutely imperative. we need to be secure. And not just secure by putting up some kind of firewall or whatever. No, it should be in the core of the platform. Secondly, privacy by design. So 2.5 years ago already, these are the guiding principles we started with. And they were proven during the audit. But by saying this, we also had to bridge a very important gap. And I think everybody knows it. On the one hand side, you want to have ease with improvement of the customer journeys, with those well, tailor-made customer journeys, dynamic customer journeys, maybe even better. And on the other hand, that privacy and security. We make a promise, dear customer, it's in your vault. The vault is outside the system. We're not going to go into that detail too much, I believe, but it's a solid pod, what we use, to really ensure that the data is at the consumer's side. And from that point of view, from here on, I said, okay, Michael, team, this is why I want it. And this is what I want. But I'm not a technical guy, so I gave you the challenge how to fix this. And how did they solve that challenge? That's something Michael's going to tell you.
All right, thank you, Leon. Before we go any further, I want to upcast the title of this presentation, because if event models can change over time, why not the title of this presentation? Before we're going to enlighten you on the emergent role of AxonIQ in the ISO certification process, and really the emerging role, because AxonIQ was intended, but how it helped in the audit process, I couldn't see it when we started using it. And I will first dive into the technical challenges, how we solved the problem, and also a very short overview of our technology stack that's quite interesting, I think. So, Leon, I want to recap the business requirements. So the privacy of the consumer must always be guaranteed. And actually, you want that all the personal data of the consumer is stored in a personal data vault. And what does this mean, people? Leon said people can bring their own Google Drive, their certain data wallet of 1Password, Dropbox, whatever they want. They need to just bring it along, and we will store their data in that system. It's like, nice integration challenge. But then he also wanted that the consumer is always in control of their data. They always have to give consent to share the data, and they can also revoke the data. And actually, the last thing, at any time, Leon wants that the consumer can cut the line between Linckr and have all their data. So unlike Facebooks of this world, who are built on top of harvesting all the data for consumer, Linckr doesn't want that. I was like a bit skeptical, like, how are you going to make money? But they found a way. On the other hand, he says, everything is to be auditable and traceable. So that means that every user action needs to be stored forever in an immutable fashion. And if you look at that, on the one hand, he actually says, we can't store or own any data, but on the other hand, he says, we need to store all the data. And then we have the other challenge that's really inversely proportional with security and privacy, is an easy customer experience. So at Lemon, with our team back then, it was really like, nice challenge to solve. So during the modeling sessions, the collaborative modeling sessions with Leon and Robert, the co-founder, we dived deeper into the problem space. So we can't store or own any data. It's actually about personal identifiable data. So we can't store your name, your birth date, where do you live, your salary. That we can't store. That we have to store somewhere else. But on the other hand, we must store all your behavioral data. And that's what, like DDD, event modeling, it's all about capturing behavior and processes. So that data we can store. So that means we can store that you shared your birth date with a notary, that you give consent. We can also even store that your birth date was stored in your pod, but we can't know your birth date. So it's a conceptual difference. And it's actually all about data. Oh, data you own and data about you. Who have heard about this concept? All right, few. So data you own, that's literally your data, and from Linckr perspective, that's all your personal identifiable data. We don't want to own it. You have the right to share it. But on the other end, we have data about you. We're obliged to share it with you. You have to know that we have the data, but we can own it. If you want to delete it, we can do it in a process, but we have to start actually to be compliant with ISO, auditability trails, and so on. So that's data about you that we have and that we want to store. So we make that difference when we're talking about data in our system with the engineering team. Okay, it's data you own, then we do this solution, and data about you, we use this solution. And the solutions are, on the one hand, we use the solid protocol. Solid protocol, anyone hear of it? All right, so it's nice. It's the protocol also invented by Tim Berners-Lee about personal data vaults, and it actually aims to make data independent of applications, and it's a set of specifications that specify how you can share permission data across autonomous data vaults. But I won't go deeper into it in this talk. If you want to know more about it, please come to our stand at Lemon, and I gladly, with my colleague Clara here, will tell you more about it. The other solution, behavioral process data, audit trails, obvious choice, event sourcing. So that's why we chose for event sourcing. I'll give you a high-level overview of the platform. The cloud is hard to see, I see here. It's not an architecture diagram, it's an architecture, because we use Structurizer for real architecture diagrams in Z4, but I think it explains the purpose. So on the left side, we have the service providers, a notary, who uses his ERP system that integrates with our provider API. There, for example, he can start a new customer journey, for example, buying a house, and he invites you as a consumer. Then in our system, to make the customer journeys adaptive, we use adaptive case management engine to make it all adaptive. And for example, if you're new to the platform, an email is triggered to download the app, and then you have to accept a connection. And just like a LinkedIn invitation connection, you really have to give a handshake that you want to work with that service provider. As a consumer, you have to be identified on the highest European security level. And that's the AIDS high standard, and therefore we didn't build it ourselves. We use the identity that handles that for us, so that we really know that you are say who you are in the platform, because that's important for the service providers. They don't want to have data from, I don't know, your brother, for example. They need to be sure it comes from you, not from anyone else. Then, for example, the provider asks your personal data, for example, your first, last name, and your birth date. They send an infomediation request. You get it in the app, a task. Then what we do with the case management engine, we check, do we have the data already stored in your solid pot? If yes, you can just give consent. If no, with the case management engine, we'll give you some tasks to do as a consumer. For example, to get the data from external source systems that are connected, for example, government systems, to ingest the data in the pot outside our system, give consent, and then it's shared with the provider. So this is the trick, actually, we do over and over and over again in our platform. If you look at the technology stack, on the left side, we have the service providers. We have just a React portal, but we are there, an API-first platform. So we have a Docusaurus portal. As a startup, you have to be mean and lean on developer portals. Can really recommend Docusaurus. 2 days and a night, and you have a nice developer portal for integration. Everything is exposed via GraphQL. Then on the top, for the mobile app, we use React with Capacitor. Don't ask me why. Back then, it seems a good choice. It still is today. And also GraphQL and Digidentity as the identity provider. For the microservices, because I will dive deeper on that, we have Spring Boot with Project Reactor, the Axon framework, and also Spring GraphQL. As middleware, we didn't build our own case management engine, because that's really complex. We use there an open source system called Cafiena. It's also an event source-based system, because case management engines are event-driven by nature. It's using Akka. Then we have Axon Server for message distribution across our microservices, but also for the event store. And everything is hosted on ECS as a cluster. We are migrating away from Kubernetes. And then for data storage, we have Solid on the one hand, we have Axon Server, and then for our read models, we use Postgres. So that's the technology stack. But now I want to first dive into some learnings about building 2 years an application, I think a quite big application with event sourcing. So we start from the start with the domain-driven microservices approach. I will explain later why and if I find it a good idea. We have the service provider domain or subdomain, the consumer subdomain, and the case management subdomain. And you see, for example, the ubiquitous language changes across boundaries. On the left, you speak about infomediations. The consumer declared a task to share data. And in the case management language, it's just a case to all the stuff. And between those subdomains, we have business processes that go across those subdomains. And that's actually my first learning I want to share. That's one we learned from Ivan from AxonIQ. He's sitting there on the left. Is if you have cross-subdomain business processes...
Oh, now you're twice. This one?
Yes, if you have cross-subdomain business processes, no bidirectional dependencies, because it's really hell. And I will give an example. So I said a provider needs to send a connection with the consumer, like a LinkedIn connection. So okay, and then there's a question of the connection problem space was in the provider thing, but then we talked about that consumers in the near future also need to send a connection to the providers. And in the far, far future, Leon wants the consumers to send connections to other consumers. Because if you buy a house, you probably do it with your wife or man. You want to be both in the plan. And before, we had the connections in both subdomains, and we were sending commands to each other, and it was really a hell. And what we actually identified is it's an own problem space, so we gave it its proper domain, and now we have a very unidirectional dependency, and even the connection service is completely unaware of the other services. So both the provider and consumer can send commands to it, they react on it, but the connection service doesn't know about the others. The second thing is, and also it was a talk about Mark, when you communicate over domains, we use process managers, or also called sagas in AxonIQ, and therefore these are our anti-corruption layers. So you see, for example, in this connection folder saga, you see literally the events of the connection service in the commands and the provider service, and here we do the translation. Because in the beginning we had the models used on all domains, and if you want to change it, it really gets very messy. So yeah, please don't do that, it's a real learning. And now it's really nice and clean. And in the future, Mark, we might also use maybe integration events, but for now we didn't use it because we are just one team. We can easily change the events on all the services. A second thing where I was really scared for with event sourcing is, or event models need to be perfect when you go to production. I was really scared for changing it. And then we went to production, and actually after 2 weeks, there came a new business requirement that required a new event model. But upcasting is actually super boring. And it's super boring because it's super testable. And unlike many database migrations, and my short career as an engineer, I think 6-7 years, I've done quite some few, and it's not unit testable. Upcasters are. So we are 1 year in production, and yeah, we already have many upcasters. You see, I don't go into the code, but it's really a few lines of code to upcast data, so it's really easy, and don't be scared to change your event model. A third lesson is, do collaborative modeling with the business, not only with your engineers. I know it's cliché, but really it works to get the terms correct, to understand everything. But don't be too strict on the how. I was really a big fan of Adam's paper with event modeling. In the beginning, I really wanted the lanes to be perfect, but the virtue is in the exercise, not in the actual outcome, so don't focus on that. And the learning is, don't focus with the business, don't talk about aggregates, sagas, partner context. He doesn't care, believe me. But with your engineering team, for example, with Laura, we create those beautiful tactical Miro boards where we talk about aggregate sagas and so on. So, and that really helps, because if you have this, it's really quite straightforward. Create a Jira ticket, link to the board, and you can implement it. And then the domain-driven microservice approach that we used from the start. The reason why we did this is because we were quite naive that it was the only way possible to enforce modularity to start with a microservice approach, because we just didn't know better. It really helped us, so I'm still happy. But of course, the infrastructure, you have a Kubernetes cluster. We have Axon Server, because that's really powerful, because we were first thinking, do we need ActiveMQ, for example, to communicate between services? With the location transparency feature of AxonIQ, it's really easy to distribute events and commands. And if I would do it anew, I would start with the modulet, but I would use ArcUnit. Now we use ArcUnit because we also have a team in Asia now, and they're not all that new in event sourcing. And with this, as architects, we can sleep securely that everyone doesn't mess up with the layered structure. So use this, and you will be safe. And it's also a nice way to communicate the expectations to the team. Next one. All right. Let's now dive in the actual topic, event sourcing, and how it helped us, AxonIQ, in the ISO certification process. Leon already said the auditor was really impressed. And the first thing I was literally in this online session with this auditor, and she was saying, auditability is also about readability and understandability of your audit trail. I think everyone knows some audit trail, some server, you have to unzip it, some terminal, do some less on it. And this is already quite structured. It are the Linux system audit trails, but it's not very user-friendly. So she asked me, can you prove this? I was like, wasn't prepared, but I had the idea. On my left screen, I opened our web portal. On the right screen, I opened Axon Server. And as you can see, I said, if I click on Create Folder, you will see on the right, Folder Created Event. And then I went further. OK, now I'm going to invite the consumer. And then the following events popped up: add connection to folder, new consumer connection for folder requested event. So it was really transparent for her. If I do this in the system, then this happens in the audit log, in the event log, because it's the same. And she was really impressed by that it's so super transparent. I said also we can't forget to put audit log statements in our system, because if you use event sourcing, every event, business event is a log. And then she asked, can you also show in the code where those events are created? And that actually hasn't anything to do with AxonIQ, but just with a good domain approach, is to use a folder structure that really represents your business domain. So I think everyone can guess where the folder created event is located. Next one. All right. And then she was like challenging, OK, an event store, single source of truth, but why do you have a Postgres? Aren't you there ingesting data from another system? So I said, how can I prove this? I went to our test environment. I just took a random projection, folder projection. I did a count. I dropped the table. In the AxonIQ token entry, I just also reset the token entry, rebooted our service, and I said, here is the proof that it repopulates based on the event store only. And this trick really helped her to be convinced that that was a single source of truth where we were building all our projection data on.
And this one is something I would like to address as well. We spoke just before. This scares the shit out of me, because they also do it on production. So the first time they wanted to do that, we had a major release, and Laura was sitting there, and she said, OK, now I'm going to drop the table. And I was like, what are you going to do? Drop the table? But she shared the screen, and you see it populate again. So I was at rest again, but my heartbeat went up. I can tell you that. If you're not into the technique, so you don't really know what they're doing, but I trust them. So trust is very essential. And they say, we drop the table. OK, so for everybody who is business-oriented, it's not scary.
Thank you. Very shortly, she also asked, can you prove how the messaging is going within the platform? I said everything runs within Axon server. So I just opened Axon console. You can see here all our services. I say, yeah, it's secure communication. I opened our GitHub folder. There you see SSL true. Of course, we had to go into AWS, show our certificate manager that it was all managed correctly. But it was really easy to convince her because we had an out-of-the-box diagram of how the communication went. And then the last one, which is also very important, is traceability. How do we know that the consumer gave consent and it was not someone else who pushed the button? So in AxonIQ, you have the concept of interceptors, and you can use those to put metadata on your events. So we put there the member ID, also its permissions, because we are in the system, but also it was fallen off, the access GBT token that was at that moment in time was valid. And now we're also working on a feature that, for example, with sagas, that the metadata is taken from the event, put in a new command, and that it's also propagated to the other events it triggers, so you really see the stream across the system. And this was also something she said was very powerful and trustworthy for her. So that is actually it from my part. Maybe some will ask a question, you didn't use the Axon data protection module yet. We don't use it yet because with Solid, all our personal data is in the event store, except first name, last name. But we can use it if the requirement is there. So, Leon?
Well, I hope you like the story. We are very happy with Lemon. Being a startup, they helped us enormously. But we also, from the beginning on, said, okay, we will keep on working together, but we also need to build up our own team. So if there's anybody really interested, I will be at the Lemon booth. And you get to work with these wonderful people, because like I said, it's not about replacing them, it's about growing. And we are about growth. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I really like that. Good story. You got a bunch of questions, actually. Very nice. So that's always good to get those, right? If the audience is intrigued. I got one here from Jan, which states, how do service providers handle the fact that now do not have a direct connection to the customer? How does that affect marketing, after-sales services, customer relationships?
I can address that. It's tough, because they always say, the first one, I like it. Can you paint it in my colors? Can it be my app? I said, okay, you're a financial advisor. And it makes sense that when people are buying a house and they need a mortgage, they come to you and they download your app. But after a year, they are going to go to the notary and they want to have a will drawn up. What do they need to do with an advisor app? Please explain that to me. Yeah. And then they start thinking. So yes, that question always pops up because they want to have their direct connection. So what we did in the whole onboarding flow, but also constantly when you are cooperating with that service provider, you will see their logo, you will see their name, so you know I'm working on tasks, requests from them, and I'm receiving data from them. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. I was trying to look up Jan, but I didn't find it. Oh yeah, there. Does that answer your question, Jan? Yes? Awesome. All right, so we go to the next. Is Linckr available outside the Netherlands? Any plans to make it available outside the EU as well?
Let's say it's built to be used across all the world.
I think we're in all app stores, so in every country. So we've launched the app in every country. It's multilingual. At this moment, just in English and in Dutch. And it picks up your phone language as the first. And if the phone language is different than Dutch, you get English. And yes, we are planning to go abroad. Because like I said, Linckr has no boundaries. Not in customer journeys, not in markets, and not geographically in countries. We are partly funded by private investors, and they insisted on from the beginning on that we should keep our minds open for international expansion.
All right. We got one for Michael again. What was the framework you used for developer experience?
So we use Docusaurus. My background before Lemon, I worked as an integration engineer. I really used developer portals, but we didn't have the budget and time for that. So I simply used Docusaurus, just like README, together with a really nice Postman collection that's really specced out, and then with some Loom videos that really explains it. And it's also a really nice way as an architect. If others need to consume our system, we really learn a lot. So then we do changes. And yeah, we are at this moment, it's very critical for us as a development team to be directly in contact with other engineers and support them. So that's how we
All right.
do it.
So it was already answered. Thanks for the one that did that, but I'm doing this for the recording. I think that's helpful. What was the name of the AK-based case management software you used?
It's called Cafienne. I don't know, some of you know Olger Wannier. He was here yesterday also. He's one of the maintainers. So it's Cafienne called. It's open source, it's really nice, it's an event store. And it's in our system, and we actually wrapped it with Axon events so that all the case management events are translated to Axon, and then we can listen to it or react on it. So.
All right. New ones keep popping in, so that's a good thing, right? So the next one. What is the difference with YIVI? Y-I-V-I.
I don't know that.
I don't know.
I don't know the tool either.
But please come to our booth, and we want to learn about it.
All right.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Blunt ones, and I like that. This is how do you make money with this?
How do we make money with
Yeah.
this? Okay, first of all, the platform, the app, is free of charge for the consumer. But service providers need information from that consumer. And they pay us. So per case file, we get a fee. And like I showed in one of the slides, we're not greedy. Because you could say, okay, in a living journey, there are 4 or 5 service providers connected, and they all talk to one consumer, and he or she is sharing all that information, and we just say, tick, 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 and we have it from everybody. No, what we do first is, okay, the consumer has to prove his identity. Okay, that involves costs. The first service provider pays for the cost. If there's a second one joining that case file, we split the cost. If there's a third one, we split the cost over 3. So everybody profits from the ecosystem, because Linckr is an ecosystem, and everybody strengthens one another. So the consumer brings in value, him or herself. Service providers bring in value because they also bring data to the consumer, which the consumer can reuse at another one. So they all strengthen each other. So we split costs, but it is the service provider that pays us.
And maybe to add on that, the data we provide is verified, so it's coming from authentic sources. So the data quality is high. And for example, if you get data from a realtor to a notary, 80% of the data they can use to pre-fill the deed. So it's also like efficiency, and that's what they like.
I think that's very important what Michael just says. The purchase agreement. Purchase agreement drawn up by the real estate agent, signed. What happens now? That document, that PDF, is sent all over the world. Emails, whatever, maybe uploads. What we do in our connection with that service provider, we don't ask just for the document. We ask for the data that is in the document. So in the personal vault of the consumer, not only the document is stored, but also the data. And that makes it possible that we share the data with the notary. And in this example, a deed for a house can be pre-filled for more than 80%. So a notary gets 80% of his work already pre-filled from an authenticated source. This also maybe answers the question why they are willing to pay.
Nice one. We are a bit over time, but I think the last question is still very interesting. What would you do differently for your next project? Specifically, question for Lemon, I see.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't start with the microservice-based infrastructure architecture because I think, especially also for a startup, it's also quite costly, the AWS setup. But we didn't know better at that time because we thought it was the only way for modularity. And also some learning in general is, as engineers, we always want to build systems that scale. But I think systems do scale pretty well also in a monolith style deployment. And with tools like Axon Server, if you guarantee the modularity, you can thereafter kind of easily split it out, each service, and deploy it in a unit. So that would be my learning.
Cool. And I think with that, I'm going to give everybody a break. So give it up for Leon and Michael. And I hope to see you all at the State and Future after that.